Hello and welcome to episode 250 of the Ego Chall Podcast. My name is Preston Byers, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host, Justin Binkowski. And on today's episode, we are talking about the CDL awards. The ballots, I think, are due or about to be due in the CDL officially, and we are doing our unofficial awards ballots. We did our predictions all the way back in November, and as we're approaching champs, we figured that's the best time that we can do it and talk about who we think is going to be MVP, Rookie of the Year, on the All-Star teams, so on and so forth. And we also have some updates on the Roster Mania stuff that really was or wasn't, depending on how you look at it. But before we get to any of that, how you doing, Bink?
I'm doing all right. I told everyone, I told you this could happen, and look where we are. We're right back here. I knew this was going to happen with Falcons. I didn't know, but that last roster mania period earlier this season really got me thinking that something like this could happen again. It seems like that's where we are. So, other than that, though, we do got some good stuff to talk about today. So this would be a fun episode.
Yeah. So you texted me at 3:00 yesterday on Monday, and you just posted that tweet from Breaking Point from Ronnie Intel saying Neptune deal is off as it stands. And then Ronnie Intel posted an article today earlier on Tuesday afternoon on breakingpoint.gg, and he said the move to bring Neptune to the Riyadh Falcons has collapsed just as the team was preparing to submit everything for league approval. According to sources, the breakdown wasn't related to the buyout itself. The Paris gentlemen had accepted the Falcons offer and were willing to let Neptune explore all future options. Both sides worked through several early hurdles, and Neptune even scrimmed with the prospective lineup, finding some success in those initial practices. Instead, the plug appears to have been pulled late in the process while Neptune was ready to join the Falcons. His representatives advised against the move for reasons that haven't been fully disclosed. The expectation is that they're wary of the limited job security on a roster likely to chase elite free agents in the upcoming offseason, which could leave Neptune vulnerable once the market opens. And then the last part says the Falcons were fully aware of the Esports World Cup roster lock rules and the risks involved, but believed they could secure approval for a two-man change without triggering penalties. That confidence was notable given the Carolina Royal Ravens were previously banned from the event for breaking the same rule. With Neptune now off the table, the Falcons have reverted to an earlier plan. We can confirm that Kismet will return to the starting lineup alongside Aluka, with the team already back in practice using that configuration. So, a lot to unpack there. So on the last episode, we probably spoke for maybe 20, 30 minutes about the Falcons and how, bringing in Neptune and Aluka, it might not be the season-saving move or moves that, the Falcons actually do need to kind of turn around what has been a really, really disappointing year. But now it appears that it's only going to be Aluka. He's going to replace Pred in this roster. So, that was part of it, that Pred and Kismet were both seemingly going to the bench. Now it just seems like Pred will be on the bench, and Aluka, who has never played in the CDL, will make his debut at champs with this Riyadh Falcons roster. How do you feel about this move, considering we did not take into account that it could just be one of the two of Kismet and Pred going out, or one of the two and Neptune and Aluka coming in? Now that it does seem like the Falcons, at least for the time being, maybe this will change by the next time we do an episode, but for the time being, how do you feel about this Falcons roster?
Yeah, not great. And, I really am excited for Luka. I've held that position since his insane burst onto the scene earlier this year, that I'm really excited to see him in the CDL and what he can bring to the table. But now it's effectively Aluka replacing Pred, and we already talked about what Pred offers to a team when he's playing at his best, and that's essentially a lot of pressure to put on a kid like Aluka to say you have to go out and play like an all-star MVP caliber player in your first ever event, especially first match against LAT at champs, I believe. It's a tough situation, and I think as a whole, I would have felt a little bit better about the change if it was a two-person swap, just because laterally it would have felt like to me like Neptune could have replaced Pred in terms of being that star SMG, and then Aluka, if Aluka could bring a little more slaying than Kismet, then that's a a positive move, but in a worst case scenario, like Aluka could do similar stats to what Kismet does. Obviously, we both sing Kismet's praises and know everything's not about stats with him, but like those are easier shoes to fill than Pred in terms of the construction of this roster. Now it's like Aluka essentially has to be one of the top slayers on this team if they are going to perform. Whereas if Neptune came into the picture, Exnid and Celium play like they have at Celium plays like he has historically. If Exnid plays like he has at points this year, Aluka could enter the team and technically be like the worst player on the team, the JCap quote that I always like to share. He could be the quote unquote fourth best player on this team, and it could still actually work in some scenarios. Now I feel like that is less likely to be the case with this Falcons team because now the SMG duo is effectively Kismet and Exnid, and it's like, Exnid has had those moments this year, but I feel like that's more pressure on the Bulldog to be 99 Kiz, and if he's not 99 Kiz, then the Falcons are in trouble, and then that puts more pressure in turn on Aluka to literally try to do what Pred should be doing, and has been known to do historically throughout his career. So I do think it's tough without Neptune joining alongside Aluka. I do think, full transparency, I know like we kind of danced around it in terms of mentioning like the roster thing for UWC and mentioning Carolina running into issues last year, but we never actually talked about how we didn't put two and two together in terms of this Falcons potentially doing a two-man switch when they technically might not have been able to. Sounds like from the report they might have tried to pull something off to make it work, but like I should have at least like put two and two together there. We talked about all the points individually, but just didn't connect the dots for Falcons and this reported roster mania saga as it is. But yeah, I think I definitely have lower expectations for Falcon. I didn't have high expectations for the new Falcons roster as is, but I have lower expectations now without Neptune. And I just really think it comes down to like more pressure on Aluka without Neptune coming in, and more pressure on Kismet to really take over and be that number one SMG, which is just something he hasn't really had to do this year. There have been times where I remember there was one map in one series I put in the notes because I like all bolded it. It was like Kismet was the only player positive on the Falcons team, and I was like, this just can't happen if Falcons are going to be successful. I think it was an online match against Carolina during the last qualifiers or something. It was like an overload, if I remember correctly, and it was one of those maps like I went on a huge tangent about it, saying that like this Falcons team isn't going to find success if that's like what the stats the squad is producing. And I worry that could be a situation that happens, especially with Aluka entering this team and having a tough debut matchup in his first ever tournament at Champs.
Yeah, just looking at Aluka's breaking point page, and obviously all of it is challenger stats, but he has very good stats when it comes to the respawns. But when it comes to S&D, it is not great, and that has been the point that the Falcons have been looking to improve on. And if he isn't a game changer in that regard, I have a hard time believing that the results will change as a result. Maybe, like you said, maybe Kismet being in a different role, maybe Aluka coming in and bringing something different to the team, even if it might not technically be better than what Pred did. Maybe all of that can produce a better results than they've had so far this season, but I am incredibly skeptical about that. I felt a little more confident if it was Neptune and Aluka, because that's a drastic change to swap out half of your team before Champs. And obviously, like Neptune, at least, post NYSL has been much better than Kismet. And, granted, we don't know how it would work within the team structure that they have with the Falcons, but I felt a little more confident, like at least it would be just dramatically different. And now I am not entirely sure of that with Aluka. But granted, like we don't know, like he is an ultimate wild card because he's never played at the CDL level, and obviously he has done very, very well at different points in the Challenger season. But we've seen a lot of really good Challengers players come up and just not perform very well. Obviously, Lunars was a big part of that last year, where he played really, really well for the first fourth of the season in the challengers, and then he came up to the CDL, and the rest of the year was pretty lackluster. Neptune is also a good example of it can work out, because he was in the CDL. I don't want to say he wasn't anything special, but he certainly took a long time to get back into the CDL, and then he had obviously just an amazing season last year. So there are different results when it comes to guys either returning to the CDL or making their debuts in the CDL. And I wish Aluka the best, but this is a very bad situation that, like you've alluded to, this is not something that you really want to be walking into as a rookie. That's a lot of pressure. And that's just, even if it wasn't champs, even if they were going into Major 2, for example, and they just were a team that was underperforming, it would still be a lot of pressure. But for it to be the world championship and you're in a position like that, it adds so much more pressure to Aluka and the Falcons.
I will say, I don't think this is something that he's thinking of probably. Don't know Aluka well, but obviously he's a young kid. I think he most likely just wants to get his shot to be a quote-unquote pro. But outside of the performance, they get dead last at champs, he technically gets 10 grand at a minimum. As long as it's last year, 7th, 8th at champs last year got 40 grand each. So split 4 ways, that's 10K. I don't know how the prize split would be for him on Falcons, but assuming he doesn't have to pay part of that for a buyout from FaZe, even though that's just a joke because he's obviously being loaned, he could drop a 0.5 at champs and it would be terrible for him long term, but short term he could technically get a 5-figure payday.
Yeah, I mean, maybe Wevy should have held out a little bit longer and got the Falcons deal instead of the Cloud9 deal, because he's only going to EWC with Cloud9, but he could have went to champs and EWC with the Falcons. So maybe his agent really screwed him over, or whatever, his quote-unquote agent. Temp on the Dope Check podcast for Breaking Point, he said, apparently, talking about Falcons, he said apparently they had 20 options. These guys were the last option that they went for, speaking about Neptune and Aluka. That, obviously take it with a grain of salt, and Donnie is Donnie, but if that's remotely true, if it's not 20 but it's 5, it's pretty concerning, of course. We had heard about Ethan specifically and potentially buying him out out of his Challengers contract and bringing him to the CDL. That of course has not come to pass. I don't want to say that it won't come to pass, because we just can't trust the Falcons at this point, and maybe they'll change their minds tomorrow, but it appears that they're on their second, third, fourth, fifth option at this point, and that's very, very concerning.
I'll just say, I like you, I think the temp thing could be a little exaggerated, but I think it's pretty obvious that at a minimum, Ethan was option number 1. So Neptune and Aluka could have been 2, 3 at the highest. I feel like it's from everything we've heard and had reported that, it feels like it was Ethan number 1 and then everyone else below that. So I again, the 20 options I think is a little exaggerated. But yeah, and end of the day, even it again, this I don't want to make this sound like we're talking bad about Aluka, because you go back a couple months, we were obviously, I in particular was obviously, being very vocal about my thoughts on him and him being in the league and everything like that. But I mean, you would assume Neptune would be an option above Aluka, especially in terms of, like I said, replacing Pred. Neptune for Pred, skill wise, that seems like a decent matchup. On paper, role wise, however you want to look at it. Whereas Aluka for Pred, again, it doesn't it's more pressure on him, doesn't exactly fill the role perfectly that you would assume, and switches up the team dynamic a little bit, but at the end of the day, maybe that's what Falcons need. And I think I said it last episode, or maybe 2 episodes ago now, they get last place with this new roster. It can't be any worse than what possibly could have happened with the other roster.
I mean, this is at least their third option, at least this specific roster, because if you're just thinking about previously in the season, QK was trialing with this team, And
Yeah.
I guess you could say it's the fourth option because there were two options with QK. It was either dropping Xnid or dropping Pred, reportedly at the time. And either none of those happened, and they stuck with that roster. And now it was all right. We're going to bring Neptune and a Luca in, and now it's just a Luca. So, like this is I don't like questioning Clayster and the team and all that, but like this is concerning. Like this is bad. Again, if they have a good performance at champs, like they get, I'd say top 4 is probably that's a good performance for them.
That's incredible. Are you kidding me?
No, I just meant like top 6 is like you won losers bracket round 1. Like that's not anything to really hang your hat on. So like I was thinking, well, I don't want to say that it's like nothing, but like I'm not going to congratulate them on a top 6 performance if they were to win 2 matches on LAN and they get top 4. Then I think that's okay. Like now we're talking here because there's only 8 teams. So like you got past G2 Minnesota, you got past the Miami Heretics, and like I don't even know at this point Toronto, and then one other team. Like that would be great, but if you get top 6, I'm not going to be like, oh man, like look at what they did.
I just think like I guess I have the bar set extremely low with them, and if they get top 6, like they have to do better than at least one or at least 2 of Toronto, Miami, and G2,
which I think is very possible. Like even if they hadn't, possible, but it's. I was just thinking, even if they didn't change their roster, I could see them finishing above specifically Miami and G2 because they obviously went to game 5 with G2. Miami has won like maybe 2 LAN matches this year. Like Toronto, I definitely feel a little more comfortable than the Falcons right now just because of what we saw at Major 4. But like that's why I was like, this is a very low bar to clear to even get like 1 win on LAN. So, yeah, but that kind of proves exactly what we've been talking about with the Falcons is that, I mean, this doesn't seem like that massive of a change to make you believe that they could actually get top 4, or that they should feel very good or like very comfortable about getting top 6. And that's a very disappointing end to the season if it does end up like that, considering they spent reportedly millions of dollars on this team and they have not gotten anything remotely close to that back. So any kind of last thoughts on the Falcons? Of course, we will speak about them again on the next episode, probably more in depth, because we're going to try to do the power rankings and champs preview at the same time, most likely, because we still don't know the exact rosters for the Falcons especially. But if anybody else were to make a roster change now, we don't know if those rosters are finalized. So we're trying to hold back and do our power rankings then, and obviously preview for champs. But any kind of last thoughts on the Falcons and their real saga that's going on right now?
Yeah, I think saga is the best way to put it, and I will say I think you did a good job bringing up the S&D stats and everything, because that obviously wasn't something I was like too closely considering, but that is something I will definitely be mindful of now with this new Falcon squad, because that's been a talking point all year with this team. And if like a Luca comes in and doesn't help, like in terms of the search, like I don't think it's even whatever his stats are, like he's not gonna actively hurt Falcons in search. I feel like even if he drops a donut every map, I guess dropping a donut every map would hurt, but you know what I mean. Like I think like a fresh perspective could possibly help in them in search, even if it's not like the best case scenario. I don't know. I just overall I have very low expectations for this Falcons team, but we will see.
Yeah, again, we'll talk about them more when we do the power rankings and champ preview. Maybe their roster will be finalized at that point. Who really knows? Let's get to our awards. So we did our preseason predictions back on like November 27th, I want to say. It was episode 197, and here we are in episode 250. And on that episode, we did our predictions for who we thought was going to be the MVP of the season, who was going to be the rookie of the year. We had 2 different awards. We previously had one award for most improved / comeback player of the year, and we've kind of split that up into two, where most improved is typically a player that like was in the CDL last year and then obviously took a leap up in their skill. And then comeback player of the year, Neptune was a great example of this last season, where he was out of the CDL and then he joins after, I believe, Major 1, and then has obviously an incredible season and really makes an impact. We also always predict who will be making the first roster change. And sometimes we say like what that roster change actually might be. We have our Paris Legion Memorial Award, which is dedicated to the complete and utter loser of the CDL season. We try to predict who will finish in 12th and last place in the CDL at the end of the season. And then, of course, we pick the champs winner and champs MVP. Of course, we don't know what that will be right now, so we will mention it, but obviously we can't really determine if we were right or wrong about that. Let's start with Rookie of the Year, because typically this award has gone, at least since the CDL has officially given it out, this award has gone to a player that has played from the very beginning of the season to the very end of the season. We saw it last year, and we debated quite a bit about whether it would be Rincor or whether it would be Super, of course, teammates on the Miami Heretics. But Rincor had been on the Heretics from the very beginning of the season, while Super joined later in the season, but had made a significant impact like immediately upon his arrival. And, we could, what I like to talk about, like when, we talk about like MVP or Rookie of the Year or like most improved, is like we can look at like what happened before this player came into a roster and what happened afterward, which was the best example was Neptune last year, where the Surge were like in 11th or 12th place before, and then after they went to, I believe, 3 grand finals that season. So like that was, the only change that the Surge made, and we saw a massive difference. Of course, Rookie of the Year, it's a little bit different because typically rookies are not like superstars. We saw Mercules certainly had a superstar effect last year, but he didn't come in until Major 3 with Toronto, and then the Major 4 qualifiers with Optic Texas. And, even Miami was not like a championship level team. They were like a top 4 team by the end of the year on some weekends, but was not winning championships. This year, it is a bit different because one of the Rookie of the Year candidates has won multiple, he's won one major, and he's won multiple online things, however you want to, classify that as. And he's also part of the longest winning streak in CDL history. And his chief opponent is somebody who's, I'd say, season was taken out from under him at the very last minute, who was, part of a very good team until that moment. And I'm obviously talking about Neum and Kips respectively. Neum for the Los Angeles Thieves, Kips for the Toronto Koi. And neither of these players, interestingly, started the season in the CDL. They were actually teammates at one point in Challengers before Neum got called up to LAT. And I don't know, is there any hope for anybody else? Is there any case to be made considering Neum and Kips did not have a full season, a full body of work to compare?
I'd say the only one who could have that argument would be Lurks. He's 9th overall in KD in the league at a 1.06, but there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's 6 people tied with a 1.06. But interestingly, the people he's tied with are Abuza, Scrap, Dashy, Mercules, and Hydra. So that shows you the kind of like category he's in for at least KD. I think that would be his argument, is that he has a higher KD than both Neum and Kips and has played the entire season in the CDL. But the placings for his team and team success this year obviously hurt his case as opposed to the other two. I could say, again, I didn't really look at the numbers too closely before this. Kipps has a 1.04 KD on the year according to Breaking Point, and Niem's at a 0.97. So I think it's really going to come down to the, that championship that Niem has, and the two minor tournaments that he has wins in this year as well. It'll come down to whether the voters value those team accolades over individual statistics. And I personally, I would give the vote to Niem because of the team success in conjunction with his individual performance. Sure, it's not like the flashiest number, but I think it, from a communication standpoint, there were multiple moments this year where it was clear the impact Niem was able to have on this team, and we always talked about how he didn't have to be the guy to pop off when he's got 3 all-star caliber players surrounding him. So I think really, like, especially like if Trake's sticked around in the whole year, I think he could have a point to make in terms of that debate. But him being out of the league for the end of the season now kind of ruins his shot at anything, more than like a 4th or 5th place finish in terms of Rookie of the Year. I think it'll come down to Niem and Kipps. Which, if either of them win, that does set the precedent going forward that it is possible for a player to win having not played the entire season in the CDL, which will be interesting. If Lurks wins, that would be incredibly interesting, because then that, shows that individual numbers can outweigh team success or lack thereof, and B, that playing the entire season in the CDL does matter in terms of Rookie of the Year voting.
So if you look at the, like you brought up the KDs, I think Kipps has the highest S&D KD. And if you look at the breaking point rating, which I believe takes into to account like team success and with their individual stats, because it, Lurks has really good numbers, but like his team obviously hadn't really won anything, so he's a lot farther down this list. But Kipps is 10th with a 1.08, and Niem is 12th with a 1.06. The only player in between them is Abuza. The only players above those players is Mercules, Shotzi, Dashi, Joe, Hydra, Hook, Scrap, Abizi, and Simp, which, those are the players that you generally expect to be among like the best players. If you're kind of listing off like a top 10, those guys are typically, almost all of them are probably going to be in that top 10. But like I said, with Niem, it's really with Kipps, it's even more interesting because, of course, Niem has been a part of this LAT roster that has, for the most part, dominated the back half of the season. They won 2 minors. They went on the longest win streak in CDL history. They obviously won Major 3. They get to the Major 4 Grand Finals and lose in the final map of that Grand Finals. And they, I believe, are the 2nd place team at the end of the season in terms of the standings. And we saw exactly what this team was before he came into this roster, and that was very disappointing. He replaced Kenny, obviously a Hall of Fame level player, but a Hall of Fame level player at the end of his career. And as you just said, Niem was not expected nor really needed to be a superstar by any means, but he had to be consistent enough. He had to be more consistent than Kenny. And he has been that to a degree. He did not have a great Major 4 Grand Finals, but, considering everybody competing with him did not get to a Major Grand Finals, that's kind of a moot point. But then you go to Kipps, and he also made a significant impact on this Toronto Koi team. I think it just seems like he might not have, because, of course, they are not a competitor at this point in the season, but he replaced Real in this roster early on, I think before Major 2. And this team got to, I believe, 2 consecutive major championship Sundays, which is nothing to sneeze at. That is a great performance for pretty much any of these CDL teams, especially Toronto, who looked really lackluster to start this season. And he made a significant impact, and he was able, along with obviously Joe, who I think we'll talk about pretty at length a little bit later, and of course Kleenex. Like they did a very, very good job of making this team into like a top 4 team by the end of Major 3. Unfortunately for him, the Toronto Koi sold on that idea, and they literally sold Joe DeCeves to the Paris Gentlemen, and just kind of wrapped up the season early, decided that competing for Major 4 and competing for champs, competing for EWC this season was not very important, which is incredibly disappointing. And I think it could have a major impact on this Rookie of the Year voting because the recency bias of seeing Neum in a bunch of really high-profile matches, grand finals, winning tournaments, versus Kipps, who is just like trying to survive with this Toronto Koi team. I think that could play a very, very large factor in how voters, who voters decide is Rookie of the Year. I don't hold that against Kipps by any means. If I held that against Kipps, that would certainly mean I hold the Carolina Royal Ravens season against Lurks, who, I have a hard time getting on board with Lurks in general because of the team performances. And of course, that is not to diminish his work. And we have given like Gwynn, for example, a few years ago when he was with the Carolina Royal Ravens, I believe we picked him for Rookie of the Year, if I'm not mistaken. And they were not a very good team. And we have picked rookies that have been on like relatively bad teams. But you don't always get the competition that he also has in the case of Neum and in Kipps. So I do think that he's out. Is there any shot for him for you? Is there any way that he could go over Kipps or Neum if you're putting out your ballot right now?
Lurks?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's he gets the votes from the people who say you have to be in the CDL for the whole season, and they look at the individual numbers and see that, the KD is slightly higher than Kipps and Neum individually. I guess that wouldn't take into account the breaking point rating you mentioned, but yeah, I think that's the 3 ways it's really broken down would be Neum gets the votes from the people who think that, the team success is the most important aspect of it, and, based on what he's done in terms of lifting trophies. Kipps would get the votes from the people who don't care about you playing the whole season in the league, but having really strong individual impact. And then Lurks gets the votes from the people who care about being in the league for the whole year and having just being that individual star, regardless of the team being bad. That the Gwynn example you shared, I'm pretty sure that was the year. Who won Rookie of the Year last year? Rancor. They didn't win anything. So I think those are the last 2 years. Was Gwynn only 2 years ago now?
I believe so.
It was. Yeah, but so I think before that, it was always a rookie that had won a tournament, and we always said that was something that helped solidify their case. And that year in particular, when Gwynn won, it was Gwynn and Abuza and Estriel, and none of them came close to winning tournaments. So, and obviously last year Miami didn't win anything, but they were a pretty good team at the end of the year, and that whole situation happened. So I guess it'll be interesting to see. Technically, there have been a couple years in a row now where a player didn't have to win a tournament to get Rookie of the Year. Could that be something that works against Neum's case? If I'm voting today, I'm voting for Neum. I just got an ad in Spanish, and I don't even know where it's coming from. That was crazy. But yeah, I would be voting for Neum, and I could see the case for all 3 of those guys. I do think after looking at the numbers, which I didn't do before, I could see more people voting for Kipps than I initially anticipated, and I could see more people voting for Lurks than I initially anticipated. So I do think this is slightly more interesting of a race than I may have previously thought, but I would personally be voting for Neum.
It's really interesting because of how badly Carolina has done this season and how well both Toronto and LAT, of course, LAT to a greater degree, have done. Neum played more series this season than Lurks did.
Wow.
Lurks and Kipps played the exact number that Lurks did. So
That should end that debate then.
Neum played 43 series according to Breaking Point this season, which is the 29th most in the league. Lurks and Kipps both played 38, and that's tied with Nasty and Craze. So, yeah, I mean, like, again, that's not telling like the complete story, of course, with like, you know, your impact, but like it does show that they kind of made up for not playing in the Major 1 qualifiers, not playing at Major 1. I guess if they had missed Major 2 for the Major 2 qualifiers, then that would be much more significant, because that's basically 2 qualifiers in one, a little bit more than that. And then you have, or if they didn't play Major 3, which is of course a Pro-Am, so you have like this group play before you get to the bracket. So like there are certain parts of the season that is more beneficial to play than others. But yeah, I do think that they have kind of negated a lot of that impact, or the advantage that someone like Lurks would typically have. And that's not something that I guess we had really thought about a lot in previous years, what the difference is in terms of how many series they're actually playing.
And I don't remember exactly when Neum came into the roster. I'm pretty sure
after Major 1, right?
Well, they were both after Major 1. I know for a fact Kipps came in because Toronto went like 0-2 the first week of the Major 2 qualifiers, and that's when they made maybe Toronto. I don't remember. I feel like both of them didn't play all of the Major 2 qualifiers, which is interesting to hear the overall numbers, especially when you meant like that was the big 11 match qualifier spree. I'm pretty sure both of them came in like after those had already started, though.
Yeah, so I'm really really split on this, because I don't think it's Lurks, because he's competing against 2 guys that really made like a significant impact to good teams. You know, even if Toronto isn't good at this point in the season, like that's literally not out of his control. Like if they stuck with their roster, even if they kept Insight on the team, like they would still be like at worst probably like a top 5 team, like top 6 at minimum. You know, we just talked about like the Falcons, if they get to top 6, like maybe it's kind of like a really great thing for them and it's really surprising. But like for Toronto, you know, I think I said it like a few weeks ago, is like if everybody had kind of like, I guess if Insight had played his best tournament and Optic had like an off series, which, you know, of course they had lost 3 consecutive grand finals. If LAT didn't have a great series, like Toronto realistically could have won a major, or could have won champs or something like that, if the stars aligned. Now, like it's kind of over for Toronto, but again, I don't hold that against Kipps. And I think that Kipps was simply the better player than Neum this year. And I think that's why I'm going to lean toward Kipps in that regard, that like head to head or pound for pound, however you want to put it, that I think Kipps was just better. And, you know, not by like a significant degree by any means, but and maybe it was the roles that they occupied on their respective teams, because, you know, like we've said, like Neum could be the 4th best player, as you put it. You know, like he didn't have to be anything other than consistent and kind of a rock for them. Whereas Kipps like was definitely relied upon in a much greater degree than Neum was, even if Joe Deceives was, of course, the star player. But I will go with Kipps. I think that I'm not going to be upset either way. If somebody picks Neum, that's great. If somebody picks Kipps, that's great. If somebody picks Lurks and says like, hey, he played the whole season, like his personal impact is kind of like washed out by his team performance, I can understand that. I necessarily probably wouldn't agree on that in that regard, but like I could understand why somebody might lean toward that. But yeah, I am going to go with Kipps. So you're going with Neum, I'm going with Kipps, right?
Yep.
All right. So that is Rookie of the Year. We had predicted. We did not have great picks. I should mention that we had a pretty limited number of players to pick from that were already in the CDL at the beginning of the season. It was Lurks, Craze, Mamba, Trakes, Abe, and Legend. So those 6 players were the only rookies to start the CDL season. And then we also always give a seventh or another option that you can basically pick the field. Basically, anybody that is not in the CDL, will they win Rookie of the Year? Of course, that had never happened before since the CDL introduced that award. So I went with Trakes with the Miami Heretics. You went with Mamba with G2 Minnesota. Unfortunately, both of those players are not even in. I guess Mamba's in the CDL technically, but he's not at champs. Trakes is not in the CDL, and they were both dropped from their respective rosters. So not great picks from us. I don't know if we've even gotten that correct, honestly, because I think I might have picked. Did we pick Rancor?
I think you did because he was the only option besides the Falcons guys, and I'm pretty sure I went Field/King of Body last year.
Yeah.
I know I mentioned King of Body, but I didn't pick him. But I did that because there was like that trolley story going around that he was like trying to money match people previously for like 10 grand or 5 figures from Saudi, like trying to get better and stuff. And I was like, yeah, I think this is funny. Like, give me King of Body. That obviously didn't work out. So I think I did Field/King of Body last year, and I think you did Rancor because I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, sounds right.
The only preseason options last year were Rancor and the Falcons guys.
Yeah, so at least we had a few better options at this point this season, even though, none of them finished the season on their rosters, if I'm not mistaken, except Lurks. Because Craze and Mamba are on Vancouver. Drake's out of the CDL. Abe is with Toronto. Legend in Challengers. So
I don't even know if he's in Challengers.
He was at some point, but he hasn't. He literally played 2 weeks in the CDL. So we don't have a great tracker with this, but it is, I think, the hardest award to pick because you literally never know. We had a discussion about Mercules last year, and we did not know who Mercules was at the beginning of last season. Granted, he wasn't that close to winning necessarily Rookie of the Year, but I think he could have came in like 4th place or something, which is pretty crazy to think about. Let's move on, though. Most Improved / Comeback Player of the Year. Again, we split up these two awards. Most Improved is pretty difficult because and both of these are pretty subjective, but Comeback Player of the Year, you at least have some kind of like setback or some kind of like benching or something, and then you can see them at least like literally come back into the CDL or have like an outsized role in the CDL. The picks that we had for this award, so Most Improved, you went with Afro, I went with Lunars. I don't know if either. I definitely don't think Lunars was Most Improved. Afro certainly could be in that pick. He could also be in Comeback Player of the Year. He's kind of like a dual pick here. And then you had Comeback Player of the Year. You put Kenny or Insight, which is like literally one of the worst picks that you could possibly imagine. Either one of them. And I picked Kismet, which is also not great considering he's been reportedly dropped and picked back up and benched and all that stuff. So I don't think that either one of us got Comeback Player of the Year. Let's start with Most Improved, though. You had Afro for your preseason pick. Do you think that Afro is the Most Improved, or are you leaning somewhere else now?
I think I'm leaning towards Afro being Comeback Player of the Year more than Most Improved. I do think he does fit the bill for both, for both options, but I just feel like he's better suited to Comeback Player of the Year just because, again, like he kind of had a turbulent start there with Cloud9, but then he came back towards the end of the season with Boston, and he really started to play pretty well towards the end of the season with Boston, in my opinion. So I'm leaning towards Afro for Comeback Player of the Year, and then for Most Improved, honestly, it's kind of crazy with how much we talked about Falcons, but I think it's got to be either Exnid or Kremp. I think I really like the Exnid shout for Most Improved just because it feels like he has really taken a step forward compared to where he was last year. Like he has evolved as a player to the point where he can be the best player on that Falcons team in some series, and he was having some takeover moments. Wasn't necessarily what we saw from him in year one. And then we also saw his evolution in S&D with the sniper, and he did have some pretty good moments with the sniper this year once he started pulling that out as well. So I think I like Exnid as an option, but I think I would, if I had to only pick one person, I think I would do Kremp for most improved. And I think it's not even like perfect. Like I do think the quote unquote most improved phrasing works the best for Exnid. I think like Kremp, just as this year has evolved, has done such good work for his stock. Like there are literally flank episodes where they are just talking for 10, 15 minutes about how nasty Kremp is and how he has to be on a top team next year, all this stuff. So I think he's like most improved his stock going in the next season, if that makes sense. But I do think he has played very well this season and has improved as a player. I would say I do kind of like Xned for most improved just because of like literally where he started to where he's at now. I feel like he's a completely different player than what we've seen when he first entered the CDL. So I like both Exned and Kremp as options for most improved, and then I think I would go with Afro for comeback player of the year because I really I listed some of the other options I had. I don't want to name them just in case you're gonna rattle them off or if you have somebody else in mind, but I think if like we have to pick somebody for comeback player, there's Afro, especially just his second half comeback this year, fits the bill the best.
Yeah, so the options, I'll list them off for comeback, would have been, Afro, TJ, Exceed, Fire, Spart, Real. Obviously, like TJ started in Challengers and then came up with Vancouver. He's not finishing the season in the CDL. Exceed, really, it's like that Major 1 qualifier stretch where they finished tied for first place. And like and we were talking about like there is like one episode in the Ego Chall podcast history where I said like Exceed MVP ? Because I think they went on a 5-match win streak with him as soon as they picked him up. And like went 5-2 in those Major 1 qualifiers, and then they got double first rounded at Major 1, and like we've never been back there since. Fire came in, I believe, during the Major 3 qualifiers. Spart, I think, around the same time, but that roster, pretty much blew up like shortly thereafter. Real started with the Toronto Koi and then was released, and then at the very end of this season finished with the Miami Heretics. And like you said, Afro, is finishing the season with the Boston Breach, and certainly has had the best finish of any of those players. Obviously Spart is on this team as well, but like I think that there's a very good case to be made for comeback player of the year, and I am leaning toward Afro as well for comeback player of the year. I will say that's a really I don't want to just be super negative, but I think that's a really underwhelming award win because it literally is just a lack of options at this point.
And it's also, in our heads, I think we did the split last year when it was Neptune, and it was basically like the Neptune award last year. So now, like, in comparison, there isn't a Neptune-esque comeback story this year, so that's why it might feel a little lackluster.
Yeah, and it's like I would like to say Spart because Spart did have like a really good start to like his stint with Boston, but he hasn't really maintained that. So like I can't really give him a ton of credit, and we literally just don't have any other options at this point for comeback player of the year, at least as far as we're aware. Maybe we're overlooking someone or whatever, or maybe there's like obviously a different criteria, but I don't see anybody. Rick's Morty's in the YouTube chat said, "What about Sib?" I mean, I
don't hate it.
Yeah, I mean, he's certainly a lot better. Like, but I feel like the spirit of the award definitely fits Afro more than Sib. What do you?
He did. I don't mind the Sib shot. I think I would still go Afro because that's just where my head was at before this. But I mean, Sib had a pretty bad year last year, and even this year there have been points where people are like, Sib has to be dropped, or general mates had to make a change involving Sib, blah blah blah, and he did win a championship this year after dealing with the Cloud9 situation last year. So I don't hate the Sib shout. It's definitely an option.
I'll go with Sib. Like I do not really want to give it to Afro, in
Okay.
all honesty. So, and I just completely overlooked like how bad it was to be on C9 last year. So yeah, like I'll go with Sib. I don't think like he's improved like necessarily. I think he's just pretty much the same exact player, but he's been certainly on a better team, and they have done a lot better than C9, particularly last year. So I will go with Sib. Shout out to Rickus Morty's in that. And then you have most improved. I think Exonet is a good pick. Again, that is another one where it's like I don't know. Like he certainly improved. I don't want to like it's not the
Yes.
same as Afro, but it also feels like when he's the one on Falcons where people are like he should be get dropped. Like, and people are like he's the odd man out in reality, even though that's not going to come to pass. I really like the Crimp one. I also think of Nasty. Granted, like Nasty was good last year, but like we got to see him in a different role. He was kind of like second, third option last year, in some regards, maybe fourth option if 04 is really popping off. And this year we got to see him as the best player on a team, at least for the majority of the season. Now he's on G2, and you can make the argument. I really, they have not had a lot of matches to suss that out, but the role that he has taken on has been much, much different. And for the majority of the season, we were talking about him as like, if there is anybody to move rosters mid-season, he's the guy. Like if anybody is looking for an AR, specifically Toronto, if they're going to try to make a run at champs, he's the guy to go after. So I think any of those three probably fit the bill in different ways. Exnid, Crimp, and Nasty. Is there someone that you're actually going to land on? Like obviously Exnid is a great pick for like improved, considering he was on literally the worst team in CDL history last year. But where you feel like you're landing here?
I'll give it to fudge. I can't. I'll split it and I'll do literal definition Xnid. Looking beyond the exact phrasing of most improved, I'll give it to Crimp.
All right, I will go with Nasty, even though it's different. A different way to say most improved. He wasn't like a bad player by any means, but I do think like being able to go from like an auxiliary piece to like a central piece, even if it isn't, he was on a really bad team, but like I think that's a, I think it's an all right pick. I don't want to pat myself on the back or anything.
Rickus Morty's is saying, what about Lunars? And he was your preseason pick, so you could give yourself a pat on the back for that. The only reason I would be hesitant to go with Nasty is because they had, those second place finishes last year with Vancouver, and he obviously didn't get anywhere close to that this season. So it's weird in that regard, but I do think he is in line with the Kremp debate in terms of like most improving his stock heading into next season and even at points this season, because there were so many times we were talking about how he needed to be saved from Boston, free Nasty, however you want to phrase it. And I still, still holds me up at night a little bit thinking about what Toronto could have did with Joe Deceives, Kleenex, Kips, and Nasty on a roster. Like, well, we'll never know. But, I don't hate the shout.
Yeah, I did think about Lunars like a little bit, but I mean, it would be in the same kind of vein of Nasty. Like he wasn't on a good team this year, so like the team results are kind of irrelevant to the matter. But like he certainly improved. I just think like going from, again, the third best player on a team, or like the second worst player, however you want to put it, to the best player on a team, and then being like a focal point of like trade rumors or whatever, and being like a significantly impactful player, or at least like in theory being significantly impactful, is a lot different. Like, and I would say with Vancouver and like building around him, I mean, like what other choice do they have? Like, and not to shit all over the kid, but like, they they completely abandoned like what they were going to do from the beginning of the season. And I'm not saying that he's not worth building around, but it isn't like a situation like Snoopy, for example, where it was like, you just got like all of this talent and like, there's no question that he's our guy moving forward. I just think like Vancouver just doesn't have a ton of options for the future of their roster when they've dropped all of their young guys except him. So yeah, I'll go with Nasty. I'm not loving my picks so far, but I think it's been a relatively weird season. I think in past years it's been a little bit easier to pick most improved comeback player of the year. So again, to just recap, I am going with Nasty and Sib, and you are going with Crimp and Afro, right?
Sure, that's fine.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure for the record.
I got Xed in there too, but it's okay.
Okay. First roster change. This is something that, this is an actual objective truth. We don't have to debate about this because we know exactly what actually happened. But what we predicted at the beginning of the season, who was going to be the first team to make a roster change. You said the Riyadh Falcons, which was incredible because they are baiting so hard about making one roster change. And I said Miami/Cloud9, and then in parentheses, or LAT to be spicy. Yeah. I would say like LAT was not like, the craziest pick in the world because that eventually happened after Major 1. But neither one of us were correct, of course, because Vancouver Surge made the first roster change of the season. They made that on December 20th, I want to say, December 17th, something like that. It was after the second week of the season, before they even went on break. Like literally they had played 3 matches, and they decided that it was time for Legend to get up out of there. And they benched Legend, and they brought in TJ at that time. If you want to go back, I don't know what episode that would have been, probably around 200. But there's a very furious episode, I will say, from our point of view about that whole saga, and basically saying that Vancouver were the stupidest people in the world because they signed a bunch of young guys and then we're like, why aren't they winning? Why aren't they good? And they signed this, particularly a guy like Legend who had never played competitive Call of Duty, especially at a high level before, and then was like, why is he dropping 0.72s? And I think that was pretty ridiculous. I hold that position very firmly even to this day. And the Vancouver Surge finishing, they finished 11th place in the CDL standings this year. I think that kind of bore out that like it didn't really change anything at all. To finish 11th, to finish 12th, it really doesn't matter unless you're really angling for the Paris Legion Memorial Award, which we'll get to shortly. But I don't think it really matters. And we should also say that Carolina almost came and snatched the victory from Vancouver because Slasher retired. I think that was after New Year's, if I remember correctly. If you want to just say they kind of tied in some respects, because I think they played about the same amount of games, and they both did it before they came back for like the new year and all of that. But technically, it is Vancouver and in Legend being benched for TJ. Your Falcons pick though is really funny in hindsight, considering we're talking about them as like they're going to make the last roster change of the season. Actually,
I would want to go back and I don't remember what my exact rationale was at that point. Maybe I was thinking like they go full NA if they struggle or something like that. I can't remember what I was thinking, but I did just go back and check. The Did Surge Fail Legend episode was number 202, and Slasher retiring was episode 204 for us. So obviously there's the holidays in there. Yeah. It's kind of crazy to me though that like this preseason stuff was episode 197. We've done over 50 episodes this year. That's pretty crazy.
Yeah. And I mean, I would imagine with the Falcons, you were probably saying like, will they just drop Xnid and go full NA? I mean, there's a potential that you said Kismet, because we were talking about like, does he fit in this roster, like the roles and all of that? I think even back then, and I think they started 0-2, if I'm not mistaken, after that too. So we're probably talking a lot more about it as the season got started as well. So again, Vancouver wins for the first roster change of the season. Let's go. Let's skip MVP and we'll come back to that. Paris Legion Memorial Award winner. So have we done this like, I want to say just the last 2 years, but retroactively we've posthumously, I think is probably the better term. We've awarded this to both the Seattle Surge and the Los Angeles Guerrillas in 2020, the Los Angeles Guerrillas and the Paris Legion in 2021, the Paris Legion in 2022, the London Royal Ravens in 2023, the Boston Breach in 24, and then the Vegas Falcons in 2025. And again, this award is for the worst team in the CDL, whoever finishes in last place in the season standings. And obviously we have 4 teams that did not make it to champ, so now we get to actually look at who is actually finishing in last place. In our defense, when the Cloud9 New York roster was announced, it was a team that you infamously said would maybe start off the season well and then trail off, a la the Carolina Royal Ravens of 2025. What ended up happening was that they didn't start off really well, and then C9 decided that they were going to go couponing and get their challengers players for discount. And they ended up putting out one of the worst seasons in CDL history. If you want to listen back to the exact numbers I have from, and I think I might have them still on my desktop. So these are numbers that I brought up on the last episode, but I think it's good to bring them up now. C9 this year went 4-31, which was an 11% match win percentage, and they went 38-97 in maps, which was 28% map win percentage. That is only barely better than the previous record holders for at least map win percentage, which was the Vegas Falcons last year, who went 26-89, 23% map win percentage. And the previous match, losing record is still owned by the Paris Legion of 2022. They went 2-22 for an 8% match win percentage. So C9 nearly got there. They had to, we said it on the last episode, but like if we didn't have the Pro-Am, maybe things are different. I don't remember if there was a Pro-Am in 2022. Maybe there was, but C9 is the Paris Legion Memorial Award winner. Our picks are pretty interesting. We were not that far off, I would say. You went with Carolina, and they finished 9th place in the standings this year. I went with the Boston Breach, and that one was hard for me because I remember being like, they literally got 3rd at champs last year. I thought like there is a chance that they could compete if they ran back the same roster. Maybe they can be on the fringe at champs, but I definitely had a lot higher hopes for Cloud9, and I had higher hopes for Carolina in some respects. And I just thought that Vancouver, I'm surprised I did not pick Vancouver, honestly, considering how bad. Maybe we thought that they would turn it around like mid-season.
I remember that was my rationale. I was saying I thought Cloud9 could have started off hot and then fallen off later. And I thought Vancouver, because of like Legend being new to COD and everything, I thought they were going to struggle a lot at first, but then get better as the season progressed. And obviously that's not how it played out.
No, that's definitely not how it played out. They weren't very far off, like from being usually like one of the worst, or being the worst team, but obviously it's pretty extraordinary when one team only plays or only wins 4 of 35 matches. Like that's pretty ridiculous to think about in the grand scheme of things. But that was the C9 experience, and that's why we have like literally multiple episodes dedicated this season to just shit talking Cloud9 in general and saying that they don't deserve to be in the CDL, which is not always the case for these really bad teams. We don't always really take aim at them like that. Again, congratulations to C9 on their award. And now we come to MVP, most valuable player for the season, not including champs, of course. And this was the only time that we had actually agreed on our pick for MVP, and unfortunately, I don't think that we're going to get it right. We both picked Mercules for season MVP. Previously, I don't know what our picks necessarily were, but MVPs have been Shotzi in 2020, Simp in 21, Selim in 22, Hydra in 23, Simp again in 24, and then Scrap a season ago. And I think we were both like, yeah, Mercules is definitely going to win. We no doubt about that. But we did have tiebreakers in case Mercules did win, or whatever, it didn't win, and we had to kind of pick someone else. You went with Scrap, and I went with Hydra. I don't like, man. They're definitely gonna be in the top 5. I would be very surprised if they're not both in the top 5 for voting. Do you want to stick with Scrap? Do you want to stick with Mercules? Is there somebody else that you're thinking about for MVP?
I think we should. Do you want to tie in the All-Stars? Because I think that's going to be like a good way to break it down a little bit. Because obviously, if you're one of the top 8 players, you're probably top 8 in MVP voting.
Yeah. So, yeah, we should explain, like, All-Stars, the way that it is set up is there are 2 All-Star teams. There's a first team and a second team. There are 4 players on each All-Star team. 2 players on each team is an AR, 2 players SMG. And so, like what Bink just said, basically your 2 All-Star teams, more or less, like, will be like your top 8 MVP voting, which I think is a good way to kind of look at it. I know that the NBA has kind of worked around, like they took away positions, so like it's a positionless all NBA, and some people kind of take that as like, I'm basically making my MVP ballot, but like the 5 best players are my top 5, then the next team, so on and so forth. So let's just stick with ARs, because I think the top 2 for ARs are set. Like, I don't really think that there's a lot of debate about the top 2 ARs, but who are you thinking about for that second team and for the ARs for the All-Stars?
So I think Scrap and Dashy are locked in as 1-2 for ARs in either order. I think when we circle back to the MVP conversation, I actually think Dashy could have a really good shot to win it this year because of the overall team success this year. Like, he just has those second place finishes plus the championship. And if you actually look at the numbers, like I didn't, realize this when I was looking at it before, but it's Scrap and Dashy tied at a 1.06 KD on the season. And then that BP rating you were talking about, Dashy is a 1.11, Scrap is a 1.10. So they're really, really neck and neck. And I could see it going either way for both, who's actually the top AR in the All-Star voting, as well as who gets the MVP nod. But I think they are very clear-cut, the 1 and 2 interchangeably for ARs. I guess with the optic fan voting effect, it wouldn't be surprising if Dashy got the first spot for ARs overall. But I do think the second team does get a little interesting. And before I looked at the numbers, I really thought, like, besides the optic effect of the fan voting here, I really didn't think like Merck's numbers, especially towards the end of the year, were going to look as good as they do right now, because I felt like his like impact kind of trailed off a little bit, especially after the meta switch. But he's sitting here with a 1.062, tied with Scrap and Dashy, and he's got a 1.15 in the BP rating that you mentioned, and that's the highest in the league. So,
and his S&D KD is the highest in the league with a 1.32.
So maybe that Merck for MVP vote isn't looking that bad. I don't know. I think I have historically, unless it's been like very clear cut that 2 players on the same team deserve to be on the All-Star team, I think I have like shied away from including 2 of the same players on the AR and the SMG team respectively. I do think, looking at the numbers now, though, like Merck has a very good case, and especially, again, the optic fan voting, I would not be surprised if Merck gets a spot there. But I was leaning towards Abuza and Ghosty for the last 2 spots. I think Merck has a really good shot, and after the fact, I think it'll likely be Merc over Ghosty. And if I had to go back again, I would probably do Scrap, Dashy, Merc, and Abuza. I think Rencor and Sib also have decent cases, but I think they are like those like first two guys on the outside looking in. Rencor would specifically just be like just pure individual stats. Like that's what an all-star is. Doesn't factor in the team success or lack thereof this season. It's just pure like he's got the second highest KD in the league, so he's an all-star. That would be his case. I guess Sib is a little bit of the comeback story that we were discussing a little earlier, but he's got a .99 KD overall in the season, so I also think he'll be on the outside looking in. So I think it's really a 5-team race, and I honestly like Abuza's at a 1.06 KD, which is the same as Scrap, Dashy, and Mercules, and then Ghosty's at a 1.05. So before I did my voting just like on my gut instinct without actually looking at the KDs. So like all 5 of those guys, Abuza, Scrap, Dashy, Merc, and Ghosty, 4 of them have 1.06 KDs. Ghosty has the 1.05. So they're all really close. I think, I think I would go Scrap and Dashy first team, Merc and Abuza second team, with Ghosty once again just missing out. But obviously, if Ghosty got in there, I wouldn't be upset about it.
Yeah, so I think that I think Mercules has kind of taken over the Celium lane here, because Celium is typically the guy that's like always at the top of the leaderboard for, I think, even overall KD and SND KD. And sometimes like his team results aren't like as great as somebody else like in a similar position. That's obviously not the case for Mercules this year, but like there has been a lot of talk, at least before Major 4, of like, okay, like he's not performing up to standard, especially when they get into these grand finals, which I always thought was kind of like. And then we heard that that comment, I think it was either Zuma or Nameless, had said like, maybe he just doesn't want it bad enough or whatever, which is like, all right, dude, like he literally won champs last year, like in his rookie season. I think he wants it sufficiently, but like the numbers really tell a pretty great story for him. But I think the major MVPs have not fallen in his favor, unfortunately, because Scrap won Major 3 MVP, Dashy won Major 4 MVP, and that's not the end all be all, but they are kind of tiebreakers, as you've mentioned before. And so like if you had to break it down, and I do think like it is close between Dashy and Merc, really, like I would say Scrap is like definitely in. He might not be the best, but like it'd be really difficult for me to pick both Optic ARs as the top 2 ARs in the league. Like, and again, we have done that before. I think Simp and Abizi were a very good example of that when we were picking like one of them's going to be MVP and one of them's going to be MVP runner up, and whichever you pick, like it is what it is. So like that's a good example, but obviously that's a very rare example of that actually happening. So I think for me, it is Scrap and Dashy in that first all-star team. And then there's Mercules, like he's definitely on the second team. It is interesting to decide who's going to be that second, or I guess the second team AR, because again, you can make a great case for Abuza. You could make a great case. Like I would love for someone to try to make the case for someone like Celium or Rencor, because the numbers really pop off, but like they do not have the team success to back that up. But Rencor, I think, was an all-star last year. You could also, I'm sure, make the Ghosty argument as well. Man, I want to give it to Ghosty. I really do.
I know you do.
I can't help myself. Like he's my guy. But I think I am gonna follow your lead and go with Abuza here. We have not talked about him very much at all this season, because especially because FaZe had one great tournament, and then there have been some tournaments where it's like, all right, they did pretty well, but not super great. And the online stuff has been really worrying at times. And we've talked about like, okay, like what's going on here? Do they need to make a roster change? And of course they didn't, but like his numbers really hold up. the team success has been relatively consistent. You cannot say that about the Paris Gentlemates. That has been a complete disaster for a good portion of the season. They've been a lot more disappointing on land and online than FaZe Vegas has. And certainly if you're going to try to make the case for like Celium and Record, like you have no shot when you're talking about some kind of like team success. They just literally don't have it. You could also try to make an argument for like Kips if you're just talking about like how well he's played this season. And I agree, like if he played the whole season and he had the team success, like a major championship, like some of these other guys that we're talking about, then I think that he has a really good argument. But when their best finish, I think, is a third place at a major, and we're talking about Abuza and Ghosty, who have major championships on their record this season, I think that he just can't really hold a candle to them in that regard. So I will go with Abuza. So we agree on our 4 ARs. We have Dashy and Scrap as our first team ARs, all-star ARs, and we have Mercules and Abuza for our second team all-star ARs. That sound correct to you?
I was answering Rickus Morty in the chat. You said Scrap, Dashy, Abuza, Merc?
Yep. And so Rickus Morty's said, I think people are sleeping on Merc. I think Merc has a better overall season stats wise than Dashy. He said, I'm taking Kips, Neum, and Draza over Ghosty, Sib, and Rincor. In my opinion, he said it's Abuza or Kips for me. I think that's a valid thing to do. I do wait. If it was like rookie of the year and we're comparing a lot of these players, like you could say Kips. Like if they were all rookies, of course, you could say like, okay, maybe Kips, but because like we don't weight the team performances as much in the rookie of the year race, even though like, you know, we obviously do if we're talking about like Neum and Kips, you know, being like the only two people. So yeah, I can't blame anybody, but I will keep Kips off. He will certainly be on an honorable mention for me for All-Stars. Let's go to the SMGs though. I have like one player that like I know will be on the first team for SMGs, and then it's like a little more difficult because it's been a little more up and down for some of these other players. The one SMG that I think has to be on it is Joe Deceives. He's had like one of the most ridiculous seasons statistically that I can remember from a sub player for a while now. He like the individual games, the performances, like he's had like 50 plus kills at some points, and I think he broke the S&D or you know like the CDL S&D record. And it's pretty rare that a player of his caliber would get traded or acquired mid-season, but I think that really shows how great he is and how highly people in the CDL think of him. And so he is like undoubtedly Rick Smurray said, but he's only finished top 3. Yeah, I know. And he like if again we literally see what Toronto is without him, and they are like a top 6 team at best. So he's undoubtedly my top SMG, and he's going to be on the first team. I would love to hear what you think, because I think there are a lot of candidates for this, like in you know that top 3, top 4, you know, trying to get in all into the first team.
I honestly, before looking at the stats, I felt the least confident in Joe Deceives purely because of what Rickus Morty is alluding to, and that's the placings this year. Like all these other guys who are in the running for the top SMG spots have won a tournament this year, and Joe hasn't, but Joe has by far the best KD in the whole league this year. So it comes down to a question of how much you think the placings outweigh the individual statistics. And I think for me, before looking at the numbers, I had Hydra and Simp on the first team, and then Joe Deceives and Shotzi on the second team, with you know the other people in the running being most likely Hook and Abizi. I put Kleenex as like an honorable mention, but that's me being a tissue supporter for life. So that's more of an outlier pick that most people wouldn't also go for, but I do think, especially in the NPC meta, we saw the tissue being an issue once again, and that's why that like you know 7th place vote or whatever goes to Kleenex in my book. But I do think outside of that the 6 top SMG spots would be between Hydra Simp, Joe, Shotzi, Hook, and Abizi.
Yep.
I do wonder how much the Optic fan voting would impact whether Hook gets on there. I think Shotzi, especially just how popular he is and the fan vote for Optic and the fact they won that last tournament, I think Shotzi is a lock. I think Hydra and Simp are locks as well. And I do think Joe should be a lock, but I'm just worried about the voters, like, again, how much they outweigh the individual performance over the placings. One thing I didn't think about until just now was now the Gentlemates fans voting. That could definitely be very helpful for Joe Deceive's case. And after seeing the numbers, I do think there is a world in terms of recency bias where Joe Deceives gets on the first team ahead of Simp. Which would be kind of crazy, but I do think it's been well documented of late that Simp has had a little bit more individual struggles recently, as opposed to Joe Deceives just like popping off. But Simp does have the accolades from earlier in the season, and he still, despite whatever struggles or however you want to phrase it, he's still got the fourth highest KD in the whole league. So I do think in any order, the 4 All-Stars for SMG, I think it's very clear-cut. I think earlier this season I was saying it was going to be more competitive, and I feel very differently about that now. I think it's just Hydra, Simp, Joe Deceives, and Shotzi. Hands down, that's going to be the 4 All-Stars for SMGs. I just don't... I could see all 4 of those guys somehow being number 1 for different reasons.
Rick Murray said in the YouTube chat, he said, I'm just saying you're punishing Kips for something you didn't punish, you don't punish Joe Deceives for. I just don't care about KD, really. I care about winning. I mean, I feel very confident in saying that if you put Joe Deceives on any of the top teams in the league, if you put him on Optic, you put him on LAT, they would also win the same events that they won or maybe more. I think that he is, I mean, we'll get to the MVP, but like, there's a pretty good case that I think he has made this year, as much as you can when you don't win anything. But like, I think like this is a pretty astounding year that he's had.
I think he's unfortunately going to fall into that Neptune-esque role for last year. I think Neptune, for both of us, we were like, we'll vote for him for 5th for MVP. And there was like the 4 other people who won events and won event MVPs listed ahead of him. And then it was Neptune. That's kind of where, like, I think the number and the KD like stand out for Joe Deceives, but I think again, unless there's some drastic change in like the voting perception or something like that, I think he's probably on the outside looking in for the MVP.
Yeah, I don't think he'll win the MVP, but I think that like he's a good honorable mention because this season, like I said, has just been really great for him, even if the team success hasn't been there. And nobody has had for as extended period of a time this season as bad of a teammate, not a teammate, but as bad of a player on his team as Insight. So like, if LAT had kept Kenny this entire season, we could say Scrap and Hydra are to a degree being held back in terms of their team performances by that. But they made a change and they obviously reaped the rewards of that. Toronto did not make a change. Their change was to send Joe Deceives out the door and get some money back for him. And we'll see what happens with Paris. I don't think that is a perfect roster by any stretch of the imagination, but I definitely, I just think super highly of Joe. And I haven't been like this really for a very long time because I remember when he was like, coming back, I think he was on LAG first and then he went to LAT. I was like, all right, like he's just some guy that plays fast and we'll see how that actually works out. And now he is one of the best SMGs, if not the best SMG, depending on who you ask, in the CDL. So he's certainly on my first team. I'm debating between Simp and Hydra specifically for first team. And I agree with you that Shotzi is like, rounding out that top 4 no matter what. Like, I think that those SMGs are pretty cut and dry in terms of like the top 4. I just don't see people, I don't see a 5th one that people are really going to gravitate towards.
Yeah. I think there's a chance Shotzi could end up on the first team because he technically has the best placings of all these guys plus the Optic buff.
I think when we do these picks, like there's a a line between what I think should happen and what I think will happen. Like, I don't think that it's up for any debate that Dashy will be on the first team. Whether he should be is, or I guess like because it's Mercules, but like I guess Scrap is also part of this. Like, could he get pushed out of first team because of the optic votes? So like maybe they'll split, maybe one of them won't get as many votes, but like I think like what will happen and what should happen are a little bit different in this regard. And Shotzi, I think, will end up on the first team as a result of that. I think the fans, and I do want to point this out, at some point in this season early on, Hook was considered for like MVP, and people were saying like he's the best player in the league, and that would also make him the best SMG, or at least one of the 4 SMGs. And he's had a really incredible year. I don't want to discount him for that, but when you have, like, we just talked about it, like the talent of this roster makes it so like sometimes the individual impact of these 4 players is almost dampened, or it seems like it's not as much as other players on other teams because they just have so much talent around them to fill up any kind of mistakes that they make. Because if you look at and again, I agree with Rickus Morty's, like KD isn't everything, and we just bring it up because like they're really the only numbers that we have to kind of point to at this point in the season. But Hook has the 15th best, or tied for the 14th best KD in the league, and that's only behind Hydra, Mercules, Dashy, Scrap, Lurks, Abuza, Renegade, who's obviously only played like that one tournament, Pred, Super Simp, Celium, Ringcore, and Joe Deceives. So, and his BP rating is a lot higher, of course, because he's on a team that wins a lot, and he's been very impactful in that regard. But if you're just looking at the SMGs that are on that roster, I think most people would say, yes, of course, Shotzi is going to get the nod here. And then there's just a lot of other SMG talent around the league. It's like, okay, do you really want to put, especially if we're going to put 2 Optic guys as the ARs in the top 4, are we really going to put the 2 SMGs for Optic in the top 4 in the league? And again, there's a case to be made. They went to 3, they went to 4 grand finals this season, won 1. They finished atop the league. But even when FaZe did that, we were still pretty like reluctant to be like, does Draza really need to be on the second team All-Star team? Can we leave him off? Like, does Abizi really need to be on the second team? So like, I think that is very interesting, but I think I'm leaning toward Hydra and Joe as my first team, which would put Simp and Shotzi as my second team. I am not super confident in that because I think that it's just a lot closer for the SMGs. Like those 4 are just so close to each other compared to the SMGs, where like we made it fairly clear that we think that there is like a relatively like large divide, at least between the 3 of Mercules and Dashy and Scrap, and then there's like a 4th that you have to pick here. And I think that it's really clustered here with the SMGs.
I do think I had Hook clearly as my 5th best SMG option right now, and I think I said Abizi for 6, and I think again that's similar to like, a shout out to Abizi in terms of how he's really turned things around since the MPC meta came in. Like I feel like that's been a real glimpse at the Abizi that we've come to know and love over the years. But yeah, I think you could, make the case for Hook. At the same time, I think, again, like it's not like, I know these guys on a very personal level. I feel like I know Hook a little better than Scrap, but I feel like Hook is one of those players where like even if he has this really good year statistically and whatever, if he doesn't get an all-star nod and his other 3 teammates do, I don't think he's going to care. Whereas if Scrap misses out on first team all-star to Dashy and Merc, I feel like he's actually going to be super pissed. Like maybe not like ever admit it pissed, but I could see like a funny ass tweet hitting the timeline if that happened.
Or something said at Champs
in an interview.
That's something that he would actually do. I think like Hook would definitely be an honorable mention. And Rickus Morty said, I don't think Joe Deceives makes winning plays. I think he gets a lot of kills. And he said that's the difference between winning players and players like Joe Deceives. Hook makes winning plays. Joe Deceives gets a lot of kills. He said Optic have been to 6 straight grand finals. I mean, I'm just going to say it. Like if Joe Deceives had the teammates that Hook does. Like Joe Deceives be going a lot more grand finals. I will put that statement out there, and I will stand by that statement 100%. And that isn't to denigrate Hook by any means, but Hook is literally on one of the most talented rosters in Call of Duty history. Like that's not even a debate. Like nobody would say that. He said it's after midnight. Preston got me waking the in the pen because he's teasing Joe Deceives. Like, I mean, like we can debate this like all night long, really. But I feel very strongly that Hook is on maybe the best team, and I'd like to get your thoughts on this, Bink, because like obviously no team has won back-to-back world championships like them, like the same org, I guess. Players have, but like they've kept this core together for 2 consecutive champs, and now we'll see if they're able to run back this exact roster, which would be again another historic performance and achievement. But he said Kips, Kleenex, Ghosty, Sib, Estrio, Nasty, Crimp, and Afro are ass. Well, I will withhold some respect for some of those people that you mentioned, because some of the question would, or the answer would be closer to yes than it would be to no for some of them. But I will
Preston
say
says
that
Ghosty is ass, confirmed. Lock
Yeah.
it in, headline.
I mean, look at those players that you listed, and then just type out on your keyboard Dashy, Shotzi, and Mercules, and then you just compare those 3 players and what the 6 or 7 players that you just listed. Is there one player on that list that is better than any of those 3 players on Optic? No. Well, yeah, no. Sorry to our boy Toby, but like the answer is no. Like none of those players are going to be on an all-star team. Ghosty might, like there is a legitimate chance that he does sneak up on that second team AR, although I don't think he is very well beloved in the CDL community, so I don't think that it's as nearly as solid. But like we can be honest with ourselves. And again, this is not to denigrate Hook. This is not to short sell him, because he is one of the best players in the league, like one of the 10 best players in the league right now, and you could definitely make an argument that he's one of the 10 best players of all time, and especially if they win champs again. Like the question then becomes like, how high does Hook go in the pantheon, and Shotzi is like really getting really up there, and Dashy will be up there, and Mercury's going back to back at champs, so we'd have to start like young goat talk. So like there are a lot of things that we can talk about coming out of this. Is that Hook has more chips than Dashy. I mean, Dashy was on like OGLA when Hook was on the Dallas Empire. Like these things are not comparable. Like I'm sorry, like Hook is not a better player than Dashy, and I don't think he has been the better player for the majority of their respective CDL careers. I don't want to talk about like CWL, because like that is like, I don't remember exactly how good Dashy was when he was in Enigma 6, but or Elevate or whatever, but like I was pretty sure that he was all right. But like I do think that like Hook has been a beneficiary, and he has added to this team. He is not Neum, not to just denigrate literally all of these players, but like Neum is like, again, we said he didn't have to be a superstar player, and Hook doesn't have to be, but he is also. So again, I'm very confident in what I'm saying. He said Hook took a pay cut to get Shotzi. I was like, I mean, I think
you guys are arguing about different things at this point. I think we both love Hook, and I think it is an interesting conversation we can have in the off season, because I think both Hook and Dashy are historical examples of like players who absolutely burst onto the scene because they were absolutely just disgusting, had nasty gun skill, and then over the years they've evolved into players who still have that potential to pop off when necessary and when the team needs them to, but they still have found ways to change their game and impact their team outside of like dropping 50 kills a map. Like they can do that, but they don't always have to. And that's a credit to both of them in terms of their progression in their individual careers, as well as their combined progression as a unit on this Optic team over the last 2 years.
It is an Optic tradition, literally, because if you look at, I think the first one to really do this on like a championship level was Karma, because when Karma got to Optic, Karma was like ridiculously talented, and especially when he was with Impact, he was like the star player, or like like the second best player depending on the event. But like everybody was like, yeah, like Karma's the guy. And when he got to Optic, what he had to do was make a ton of sacrifices for his team, and as a result, he won world championships with them, or he won one world championship, but like he became the first 3-time world champion in Call of Duty history. And then Crimsix also did this to a respect. Scump definitely did this at the end of his career, because if Scump really wanted to be like a kill whore, he would definitely just like, he could do it. Like he could drop 40 kills on most respawn maps, but he knew that that wasn't what was needed to win a championship or to win matches at the end of his career. So I think that it is just fitting that Shotzi and Hook learned how to do that, to make their teams better without like splitting up, because sometimes that does have to happen. Like the players, their egos are so big that, you know, they want a certain role, they want to do a certain thing on a team, they want to get all the kills, and you can't have all of them, because sometimes, like, you know, just not going to work out. And they figured out like, we want to be with each other, we want this team to work, so we're gonna like work around that. So I again, this is not to disrespect Hook, love him, I think he's awesome. His comeback like is one of the craziest things that I've ever seen in the CDL, because I thought he was literally going out of the CDL at some point. I thought he was going to go like the Illy route, where it was like, you know, kind of looking back and being like, well, that was kind of a missed opportunity that he just didn't do it. And now he's like, you know, we're talking about him, and he's potentially going to retire with, you know, 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 world championship rings. I don't know exactly how they're going to stop them. So I really feel confident about how good Hook is. It's just, I don't want to.
I think we're talking in circles at this point. We're all saying the same thing.
Yeah.
Hook's freaking nasty. It's just, there's only 4 spots on the SMG All-Star team. I think there's a very realistic chance that Hook could get in there. But I do think at the end of the day, he's most likely going to finish 5th, because I just think Shotzi will get the majority of the Optic votes, and then I think especially Joe getting the Paris General Mates votes, and then I think Simp and Hydra are in the other spots. But, you know, if Hook makes it, we're both going to be happy for him.
Yeah, and I'll go with Hydra and Joe as the first team, and then Simp and Shotzi for the second team. I don't think that's actually how it'll work out, but that's what I would pick for my ballot.
Okay.
And then MVP. So obviously it has to be one of the first team all-star starters. We have the, you know, generally we have the same people, we have the same ARs, we have similar SMGs. Where are you leaning for MVP? Because you could stick with Mercules, because it is very possible that people will take into account his full body of work, and not necessarily, I think what people have kind of hit him and dinged him on was the grand finals performances in some respect. And that's kind of what's held back some of the hype that is he probably should have. But where are you leaning for season MVP?
I think, especially, so heading into the show, before I pulled up the breaking point stats and everything like that, I was like 1,000%, not 1,000% seems like, it obviously is exaggerated, but it exaggerates. I'm not trying to do it for dramatic effect. I was definitely moving off of Merc just completely. I thought the numbers were going to look much worse than they did. I think Merc could still end up getting some MVP votes, and that would be really cool for both of us since he was our preseason pick. I think I would individually vote for Scrap. However, after seeing the numbers, how close Scrap and Dashy are statistically, I think Optics consistency with the second place finishes, and then Scrap having those, like, you know, non-second place finishes to go along with his championship, I feel like Dashy is going to end up winning this, and I think it's going to be because they have comparable numbers and the placings to be like a sort of tiebreaker. I still think I would vote for Scrap, but I think there are a lot of good people to vote for this year, and I feel like in other years there have been times where we're like, if one of these 3 people win, I'd feel okay with it. I feel like right now, like basically, if one of the 8 guys that we mentioned, I'll leave
Not
out
Abuza.
the sorry Abuza, yeah.
Yeah.
So I'll say if one of the 7 guys that we've named for our All-Star first teams, AR and SNG, wins MVP, I'd feel pretty good about it.
Yeah, I think that I would also take Simp off, because
Wow.
that's the history of the Ego Chall podcast has been kind of built on the back of Simp and like Phase to some degree, but I I don't think that Phase has been nearly consistent enough. Even though like I have said like the value that he brings to that team is like way
Yeah.
higher than people kind of give him credit for. But at the same time, like it's kind of like a Joe Deceive situation. Obviously, Joe hasn't won, but like Phase has been like really up and down, and that inconsistency when compared to Optic and LAT, especially in the back half for both of them, I just don't think that there's you can make the argument for Simp and certainly not for Abuza on that. I I'll just get it out of the way. I won't vote for Joe, but I do want to like just put him out there as like the value that he brought to the Toronto Koi, I think is kind of ridiculous because they could actually finish like a I think they could finish top 8 at champs when with him they probably could have been a top 3 team, which is like pretty significant. We'll see what happens with Paris. I'm not like again, I'm not super thrilled with this roster, but I do think that it comes down to the top 3 are probably Mercules, Dashy, and Scrap, and I will go with Dashy. I mean, he was if they had won Major 3, Optic did. He will. I mean, if they had won, he probably would have been Major MVP. They did win Major 4. He was MVP, and I just think like the impact that he's had, especially in these grand finals, even the ones that they've lost, I think is fairly significant. So yeah, I will go with Dashy. I think that Scrap probably gets second, and then Mercules gets third. I don't. How much of the fan vote is there for MVP? Is there any part of it, or is
I don't
that
think so. No, I think it's just All-Stars for fan voting.
okay? I just want to make sure because that would be a little bit ridiculous. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think it will be Dashy, and it would be a long time coming because he's always been kind of like on the cusp of a lot of these, and he's had to compete with some really great ARs and obviously SMGs as well. But like I do think that um, he has it coming to him to actually win this, and especially Scrap already won it last year. I think that also plays a factor sometimes because we haven't, to my knowledge, had a back-to-back MVP. We've had 2 times, but we haven't had someone just win it back-to-back seasons. Even though
Yeah.
Celium has probably been very close, if we have to look back on it. But yeah, I will go with Dashy, and I think that Scrap finishes in a really strong second place. Jay Hearn said for sure it's Scrap. And then Vince said, never understood how Joe didn't land on a better team earlier in the season. I think Toronto just thought they could actually win or that they were just going to try to win earlier in the year. And they just kept him and they just got their one pick or they got their one, like offer from Paris and kind of was like, all right, like, we're not going to try to win now. So, yeah, I really think like if Paris doesn't have like a great finish at champs, like that would be really disappointing because it would be a waste of Joe's season and Paris's season as well because they won Major 1 and then just kind of went off into like the woods for the next like 5 months. But I guess we'll have to see. Any kind of last thoughts as we wrap up our award show?
Just to hit it because we can't confirm it yet, but for champs winner and champs MVP, I think it is pretty funny. I went LAT for champs winner and champs MVP. I did a BZ. You did Optic for champs winner and Hook champs MVP. So I think we probably should have mentioned that about 20 minutes ago when we were having a heated debate about Hook. And, Preston 6-7 months ago was picking Hook to win champs and champs MVP.
Well, I if we go back 6-7 months, I guarantee that I said at some point in that that like the best player on the team does not typically get the champs MVP. So I can almost guarantee that because I see Kismet on this list. I see Crimsix 2020 on this list. I see a Beezy 2021. So like I feel very confident that I ended up saying like, Shotzi or Dashy or whoever, or no, like we obviously said Merc, but like Mercules probably isn't going to win champs MVP. He's going to win season MVP. But so I was clairvoyant in that. I can almost guarantee that. Rick's Morty said, did you guys talk about Nep no longer going to the Falcons? Yep, we spent probably the first 20 to 30 minutes talking about the Falcons stuff. Rick's Morty said he also said win MVP. I did not. That is slander. You'll be hearing from my attorneys shortly. Although I think Bink said it either in the pre-show or the show. It's been such a long show I don't even remember at this point. But he did say Gwen could be a good comeback player of the year candidate for next season, which I do agree with. We'll have to see what actually happens, but I think that about does it. Again, Pick'em is so far 186 and 90 for you, 187 and 89 for me. Trimmer is still winless on the year. That does it for our award show. We'll have to wait and see what actually happens with some of these, and some of them you won't have to wait and see because they're not actual awards. They're just stuff that we talk about. We will be back most likely this weekend or at some point to talk about champs. It is coming up next weekend, in about 10 days from now. And we're going to do our power rankings, our final power rankings update of the season. We're going to do our champs preview. We're going to give our predictions. Of course, we did our preseason predictions, but we're going to potentially update, maybe not update our champs winner predictions, our champs MVP predictions, and we'll break down the tournament in total as well. Thank you to all the people in the YouTube chat. I don't know if Bink wants to list them off, but we had a lot of people talking. We had a lot of people watching. And again, always appreciate, always love the support that you guys give. Please like, subscribe, follow the podcast feed wherever you're listening and watching on. We're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, as well as YouTube. You can watch the podcast live, the live stream on YouTube or Twitch, twitch.tv/Ego Chall Podcast. You can follow and subscribe there. You can also follow and subscribe to Bink on Twitch, twitch.tv/JBink with 2Ks. You can follow us both on Twitter at JBink with 2Ks, at Pres Byers, and the podcast tours at Ego Chall Podcast. And the next show is like kind of a TBD because we did this a little bit earlier than we were planning because Bink's going out of town. But Champs is July 16th to the 19th, so we'll definitely be doing it before then. You don't have to worry about that. And just make sure to subscribe to the feed or to the YouTube channel or follow the Twitch channel, and you'll get notifications. Bink just got a notification before we started this show. So it's always good to know when we're going live and when we're uploading the podcast. So again, please like and subscribe. And I think that does it for me. Bink, take it away.
Yeah, I'll try not to talk long so we can both get in the AC. But like Preston said, we did do this show a little earlier than usually would have on a Wednesday afternoon because I'm going to Maryland for the next couple days to help out with my sister. I'm going to see the Yankees play in Nationals in Washington, D.C. I've never been to that stadium before, so I'm really excited to get to a game there. And I'm going to that game on Saturday, so either way, we will be live before Champs. I will most likely be in a different setting, different background, and have to figure out a way to record from Maryland, though. And that's why it's just a little TBD. But we will be live at some point over the next couple of days to do the Champs preview and whatnot. We'll just have to stay tuned to figure out exactly when that will be. But like Preston said, we do definitely appreciate all the support and love. Obviously, shout out Rickus Morty, Jay Hearn, Bince1319, anybody else who I missed. I don't think I did, but shout out everybody in the YouTube chat. Shout out this guy Jay Bink on Twitch for being the latest Twitch subscriber. He sounds like a really cool guy. And yeah, we will be back very soon to do the champ preview. And like Preston said, I mean, less than a week and a half now at this point until we're actually getting to watch COD Champs, and then before you know it, it's EWC time, and then back into full-on roster mania. So getting to the nitty-gritty here the season, and I hope you guys enjoyed the show today because it was a little bit of a longer one, but I do think we had some good stuff to talk about, and I had a blast. So Thank you guys as always, and we will see you on the next one, whenever that is. Remember to send the chow.